Hello and welcome to Breaking Even with Al Paton on your official SuperCoach AFL podcast feed. Heading into round 15, a massive week again for SuperCoach Al Paton, your host here, and two huge names on the couch. First of all, welcoming back Patch from a few weeks overseas.
Hello.
I'm sure the sun in Spain was nice, but couldn't resist the depths of Melbourne winter to come back and talk SuperCoach.
Could never resist the siren call of Melbourne winter. Tinto de Verano and Sangria got nothing on, just hanging out with you guys.
We're very happy to have you back. And with us, special guest this week on the couch, Drew Jones from Fox Sports News, of course, and GOAT Fantasy, which he is representing very well on the couch today. So brand new brand, I guess, in the fantasy world. So feel free to spruik it. But we're also going to dig into as much of the fantasy news as we can while we've got you here. But welcome, Drew.
Well, boys, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for coming back for Spain, especially for my appearance on the podcast.
I changed my flight since I heard you were coming on.
Ibiza could have had you rocking out.
Nah, never. Not over being here.
But
I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm excited to talk SuperCoach. I reckon it's a really interesting week. There's just a lot going on to try and get our teams good for the stretch run home.
Yeah, exactly. You're starting that end sort of, finished team in inverted commas is sort of the F word is being bandied about. So how do we get there? And then, of course, we've got two more buys to negotiate. And
yeah, what does it look like? What is a finished team?
What counts as a premo is, the definition is becoming very stretched.
Very rubbery.
This time of year. But reminder, of course, everybody like, subscribe, leave a comment. We love all your feedback. Watch on the Code Sports YouTube channel, and that deal for $1 for the first month for Code Sports is still out there. So you get all your sporting news, plus, of course, SuperCoach Plus with your break-evens, buy planner, projected scores, live scores over the weekend. Everything you need to dominate in SuperCoach is there. But every SuperCoach knows managing injuries is the key to success. This is the Injury Report, proudly brought to you by HBF, your health dream team. A few names on the list today. Jason Horne-Francis, very interesting one after he came back from injury last week. A few of us hoping he might drop in price. That's not really happening. Scored about 150 and he basically didn't play in the last quarter with some kind of shoulder injury. Port saying he's a test for this week against the Swans. Our man over there from the Lair, Simeon Thomas Wilson, says he will play. So safely bring him in this week. That's what I'm looking at doing. Charlie Curnow, a test again this week after going off with the calf issue for the Blues and a few issues going on down there. Sam Walsh, we know the news came out that he's going to miss 4 or 5 weeks with a foot injury. So, a few fringe Blues players who might get a chance over the next few weeks.
Harry Mackay as well will miss 4 to 6 after going back in for surgery. So that's another spot open. What does that mean for Tom de Koning, Mark Pitnet? We'll have to wait and see. Kieran Briggs is apparently still 1 week away with an ankle. So does that mean he comes back? Does Nick Madden now have the spot for the Giants? Todd Goldstein is out because he's too old. He just needs a spell and honestly relatable. Like I can get behind that. So Vigo Vicentini will make his debut, which is very exciting for Essendon fans. He's our 29th debutant for the year, it feels like. But there are troops coming back for Essendon. Zach Reed, Mason Redmond, Carl Langford and Saad Al-Houli coming back after the bye, as is, I think, Jordan Ridley.
That's another good name.
Exciting, but bad news for Lockie Blackiston owners,
some of
which
those
I'm one of 6.
Bombers. Oh, wow, really? Some of those cheapies that we're enjoying at the Bombers at the moment. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the team looks like after the bye.
We'll see.
And Drew, now you're the man, obviously, who has been sniffing around, have the actual inside information and some interesting stuff coming out of maybe Sydney this week and down at Moorabbin.
Yeah, so chatting with the Swans this week. So Matty Roberts, I think, was always going to come back from illness, as we knew. And it makes things interesting down back. Like if Callum Mills keeps that distributor role, we know Matty Roberts is a bit of a pig, isn't he? He loves getting the pill down back. But this is a great situation for the Swans this week. Off the back of the bye, they're going to welcome back Errol Gould. I mean, they say that he's a test, but all he has to do is get through training and he's good to go. I mean, unbelievable scorer. It would be so awesome if we could just all trade him in this week and just enjoy the ride with Errol. Unfortunately, you'd think the first couple of weeks is going to take him a little while to get going. And then Tom Papley comes back as well. Obviously not super fantasy relevant, but maybe one for your draft. And then at Moorabbin. So, they're not going that well. And the old boys through the midfield, your Zach Joneses and your Hunter Clark haven't quite been getting it done. So sounds like there's going to be a bit of a youth movement this week for the Saints. So if you're a Boxall owner, likely he comes back. I wouldn't be surprised if Hugo Garcia makes his way back into the team as well. And then Mateus Filippo is the interesting one. I think every single SuperCoach coach at the start of the year had Mateus Filippo in our team. That 5-week stretch last year where he played midfield, absolutely sensational. Just hasn't been able to get the body right all year. So he actually ruptured his plantaris, which is essentially a vestigial tendon, vestigial meaning it's useless.
It's an appendix of the leg, basically.
Appendix of the leg.
Yeah, I'm a doctor.
Yes. And so it runs down sort of this calf area, extremely painful to rupture it. So he's essentially missed a game because of how much it was hurting.
Yeah, okay, wow.
But the best case scenario is that you rupture it totally and then you're pretty much good to go. So Luke Hodge told this really interesting story. I don't know if you guys heard this. He partially ruptured it playing for the Lions, and then during the week, like a few days later, he had to run across the road because a truck came out of nowhere, and running across the road, he totally tore it. So he was able to play basically the next week. So Matthias has been through a bit of pain in the last couple of weeks after doing the plantaris analysis, but he should be back, long story short. So Filippo does come back after his excellent score of 6, I think it was, in Alice. But if you're a holder like me, welcoming him back to F6 with open arms. And just one really quickly, we were talking about the Blues. Nick Newman, after rupturing his patella tendon, is about to go into full training to have a crack at playing this year. So if he's just sitting on the waivers in draft somewhere or something like that, we might see a little Nick Newman at the back end of the year if he can get through training.
Breaking news.
Yeah, that's what we got you on for. That is a wrap on this week's injury report. Thanks to HBF. Make the smart move. Join HBF, your health dream team. A reminder, of course, we've still got a couple of bye rounds to go. Adelaide, Hawthorn, Melbourne, West Coast have the week off. So a few names that'll be missing there. Of course, best 18 scoring. 4 trades. If you still have a boost left, I might actually finally use it this week. I've been hanging on to one in my back pocket for 15 rounds. Finally time to pull it out.
Your restraint and self-control is beyond belief, Al. I could never.
The first 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So 3 trades obviously for most people, I think. A quick look at some break-evens for the week. We've mentioned Callum Mills, so he's on the bubble, 357k, break-even of 35, so his price will go up after his game this week. Hopefully he scores all right for those of us trading him in. A couple of names that, as I mentioned, a few people were hoping would get cheaper, but maybe not getting down as much in price as we would have liked. Jason Horne-Francis, 491k, break-even of 131. Sam Darcy, 461k, break-even of 147. I know we've got some questions coming on those, but Patch, would you be looking at trying to wait, hoping they come down a little bit further, or you don't even worry about that anymore now?
I'm not, but I think there's certainly scope to wait a little bit. Depending on your trade situation, your cash situation, your bench situation. It's very team dependent. It's very aim dependent as well. If you're playing for leagues, then you obviously wait. If you're playing for overall rank, then maybe you want to go early on Sam Darcy playing your beloved Tigers under the roof, where he could hit that break even of 147 at 3/4 time, really. So yeah, I'm not waiting, but I think there's certainly, especially with best 18, you can certainly hold off that extra week and wait until the prices meet. If you've got like a Kane McCauliffe or someone else still generating cash, then you get pressure from both ends of the price dropping and his price rising. Yeah, I think you can wait, but I'm greedy, so I'm not.
Yep, I think that's fair. And a couple of big names who are coming down in price. I mean, Marcus Bontempelli's the massive one. A lot of us paid up 650 grand for him a couple of weeks ago. He's now down to 587. This is the first time he's been under 600,000 in about 3 or 4 years. And his break-even's 177. Again, playing Richmond this week, so wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility for him to hit that. But and Max Gawn's now down under 700k. I mean, Tristan Cherry's got a break-even of 159. He's going to be under 700k. So it just shows it's very hard to maintain those really sky-high prices for an extended period. But did you pay up for Bont, Drew, or where do you sit on him? Is he someone that I think you'd have to be in your plans if you don't have him currently?
I think coming out of the bye, just about all of us had him ready to go, right?
Yeah.
We thought Thursday night footy, we can sit back, watch him under the lid. Obviously, he wasn't great first week back, but then last week that was a shocker. So, yeah, that's hurt. That's hurt quite a lot.
2 vice captains in a row as well for a lot of people,
just
myself included, which
literally in the bin.
Just not a great time.
I always think with this stuff, it made absolute total sense. It ticked every single box to bring Marcus Bontempelli in, proven scorer, off the bye, vice captain option, affordable. Sometimes you just have to hold your hands up and say, Supercoach is going to burn us every now and then, and that's what Bont did.
Yeah, I mean, I even got him a week earlier, and I think other people thinking, look, he was 650-something K, and I thought, he might drop a bit, but what's 20K? And now it's, gone a lot further than that. But
Just
you
takes
look
one
at your team
score.
on paper, it's still very nice having him
Yes.
sitting there. New segment that we brought in last week, rogue traders. And look, I think Chloe mentioned on the couch last week, one of her rogue trades that she picked up on was that someone actually traded Bont out last week and traded him to Luke Parker. And we thought, do they have some information that none of the rest of us have? And look, it's gained them about 30 points. Parker scored 90 last week, but compared to the Bont, and you don't miss out on that price drop. So maybe they were onto something. So looking at what obscure trades are out there this week, and I noticed that 7,000 people traded out Henry Huswaite after that massive game last week. I was kicking myself and I thought, I've already traded him out, and now he's back. And turned out didn't really hurt me too much. But 2 people are trading him in. So some people have faith. I'm not really sure what the logic is there. And I did notice
I think it's Henry's mum and his dad. I think they're the 2 trading him in.
3 people trading in Nat Fyfe this week. A Supercoach favourite of old. He is on the bubble after playing 2 games with a break-even of 165.
Playing Essendon.
Well, that's true.
Could
He's been the
score-
sub.
could
He scored
score
sort of
70.
20 and 30 in his 2 games. But
He could score 70 as the sub in the last quarter. So you never know.
anything's possible. Did you find any trades there that you liked?
I did. I love this segment. I was listening to it on a beach last week and just cackling away. This is great. This is right up my alley. 7 people have traded in Scott Pendlebury at 500k, coming off the bye. Not the upgrade I would have picked from Collingwood, but hey, he's still got some life in the legs.
Maybe more.
I actually love that. That's a legacy pick if I've
It's
ever
so
had one.
good. It's similar to picking
All the
Gary
tags are
Ablett.
going to Daicos. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, he can run free. Sidebottom's got a lot of attention this year as well. But
For a guy who is going to be a walk-up Hall of Famer and possibly an AFL legend in future, he's never had it easier in the midfield.
Yeah.
Nick Daicos gets all the attention, and then still Sidebottom out of nowhere is having almost a career year as a centre bounce midfielder. And then Pendles is literally a Rolls Royce just rolling around doing
he's
whatever
still
he wants.
got it. You watch him and you're just like, no, he still can just stop time, just snap of a fingers. So anyway, good luck to those coaches. 3 people have traded in Jamari Ugle-Hagan after he returned to training at the Bulldogs this week.
Good banter.
That's rogue. Not sure he's a walk-up start for the Dogs despite
They
training.
are playing Richmond. But
They are playing Richmond. Lauren Wood said he was, hitting targets lace out, but I'm not sure he's quite ready to come back in yet. And my favourite one, 10,000 coaches have traded in Callum Mills. We've spoken a bit about him. 2 coaches are trading him out. They're zagging as much as anyone's ever zagged. And that's just real good. That's good gear.
Can someone explain how that happens?
No, I
Can we
can't.
explain how Callum Mills gets traded out this week?
I mean, there's some kind of autofill teams and things that are around, but I can't imagine that even that would be suggesting those trades. So.
Who knows? Maybe they're doing it now that they've realised it's a segment just to
get
picked
on.
up.
Yeah, that's a good move.
Or maybe they have some serious inside word that's going to make us look very silly.
Jacob Constanti's trading him out of his team this week.
Well, I mean, I might jump ahead to some people asking about Mills. Is he, do we trust him? And given that you've got Roberts back there, Riley Bice suddenly back in form last week, probably having Mills out helped him.
But even
the Swans aren't going that well. I mean,
you even add Errol Goulden to that mix. And
exactly.
What happens to the midfield? Does he play midfield? Does he play inside? Does he play outside? Does he? Yeah. What's your take on where he actually lines up in the Swans side now that they've got some troops back?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Like when you throw, say a Sheldrick into the mix, who Dean Cox has clearly tried to expand his role in the midfield. Then you got Errol coming back in. Chad Warner probably first 6 weeks was playing a bit more forward. Now he's been very much a midfield guy for Cox over the last couple of months. I don't know if there's a spot necessarily for Mills in the midfield, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think him as a defensive distributor, that role suits him. But then when you're throwing in Matty Roberts, I mean, Harry Cunningham got a fair bit of the pill their last game. Like there's a few mouths to feed there.
Blakey.
I think, Blakey's having a great season. I think Bice might have been a bit further up, maybe on the wing in recent weeks, which looked like it suited him. But all those numbers, it doesn't quite compute. Like someone's going to miss out here. Yeah. I think one thing with Mills is the reliability factor here. Like it's been 2 or 3 years since he was, at the top of the cream of the crop in terms of a Supercoach player. And the feet are notoriously tough to manage. And they're shocking injuries. There's so many bones in the feet. There's so much that can go wrong.
Just poorly designed.
They are just, big design flaw in the human body. And so I think my big thing with Mills here is that the Swans probably aren't going to play finals. They might even lose this week, which would absolutely put the nail in the coffin. If he rocks into the club on a Monday with a sore foot, they are not going to take any chances. And then all of a sudden you've got another trade to make when we're all running out of them. That's the big flag for me with Mills.
And the fact that he then is so cheap is great if you're trading him in, but if you have to trade him back out again, where do you go? Who do you go to? It could end up in a Mason Wood kind of situation.
Also, do we think that Matt Roberts is one of the people who's traded out Callum Mills this week, who's returning?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Possibly. Traded Callum Mills out for Matt Roberts. He traded himself out when he was sick, on his, when he was in bed with gastro, and he's traded himself out.
Interesting one. Are you bringing in Mills in this week?
I am not bringing Mills in this week. And Drew, you're not either, you're saying?
No, but things can still change because the price is so tempting.
The thing. Yeah.
It's so tempting, but I have my reservations.
Yeah. I mean, he's in my trade, I'm using those 4 trades potentially, and he's certainly in there, and it's Roberts 2 Mills on the basis that, I think he can score more than Roberts, but probably going to be similar, to be honest, 90 plus I'd be happy with. But you get 90 grand in the deal, and that can be very useful to fix some other issues going on. But yeah, he could end up in a hole if he did miss a few weeks. I'd be hoping Matt Carroll can continue that form from last week and have to bring him on as defensive cover. So yeah, it's not without risk, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's fraught with danger, and I think at the price it's probably worth the risk, but I'm not going there, partially because my team needs a forward and partially because it scares the heebie-jeebies out of me.
It'd be much easier if picking him in round 1 would have been much more comfortable. Yeah,
absolutely.
Player at that price for sure. Lots of other questions today. Someone asking straight off the top, what's the game's eligibility for DPP, the next round of changes? So they're not too far away. After round 17, we'll get a few more. And how it traditionally works is that you get a huge batch early in the season and not so many. I don't think there'll be heaps of names this time around. One that I'm watching is Tom Liberatore, whether, he played 11 games as a midfielder. So whether there's enough time to build up the 35% to get DPP, but he has basically been playing sort of in the back pocket for the last few weeks. So he's one name we'll be watching. I think Tim Kelly's a chance to get DPP, maybe forward mid. But we'll have some numbers on that very soon.
That all was for my draft side, not for fantasy, just before anyone yells at me.
You think Sam Doherty gets back status?
Yeah. Well, he should. Yeah, that's one we'll definitely be watching, actually. Yeah, if he stays there, because I suppose it helps that he didn't play a heap of games in the first half of the year. So that might be who the person has in mind, talking about making sure you just get 8 under your belt.
And then Zach Johnson at Essendon.
I was about to say, has he played enough games? I don't think he or
Angus
8. Clark.
So he's only had the 3 so far, he probably won't get there.
No, so the dream of having him and Angus Clark both be able to have the DPP probably won't eventuate.
Is it too late to get Zach Johnson this week?
I think so.
If you're looking at a downgrade?
I think so.
Yeah, I think because now, talking about that Mills situation, just that cash is so valuable. You just need the money to get the best team as possible on field. I think he's going to be really handy bench cover, but if you missed him last week, I'd probably get Harry Rouston or someone instead and,
Tom
have an extra 50, 60
Tom
grand.
McCarthy early.
Well, obviously, don't have him.
I think, the cash is now too expensive to bring him in, and he's also at risk of either being the sub or being omitted when Essendon gets some cavalry back, which I don't think he will be, but he's certainly at risk of, then suddenly a poor game or 2 in a row.
And they have the bye next week anyway.
Yeah, true.
Not ideal.
No.
Question, who are some of the must-have primos we should have in our teams for the run home? So pretty open-ended question, but I did quickly look up the top-ranked players in each position, and the number 1 defender based on averages so far this year is Tom McCarthy, based on that one game. But after him, you've got Sinclair, Whitfield, Lockie Ash, Max Holmes, Bailey Dale. So, look at those. I don't have Whitfield. I don't have Ash. I don't have Bailey Dale. The Bulldogs, we might get into this later, have an amazing fixture to come home. I suppose we'll quickly run through the other lines. The number 1 mid based on averages this year is Tom McCarthy as a DPP. And number 2 is Dion Prestia. So there you go. Just based on the 2 games. But Andrew Brayshaw, Zach Butters right up there. Hugh McCluggage, who I think hardly anybody has there. Bont is an interesting one. So he's sort of in the top 5 still based on averages. And George Hewitt, who I like if you don't have him, is still a pretty good price. Ed Richards. So, any of those Bulldogs. Interesting name. Number 21 currently is Nick Daicos. Whether we think he's someone you would still try and get. Ruck, obviously Cherry and Gawn. Looking at their averages for the year, Cherry has an average. He's the number 1 ruckman with an average of 130.2, and Max is number 2 with 130.1. So And then it's a bit of daylight till the next on the list. And then when it comes to the forward line, Bailey Smith, it's sort of a weird forward line this year where pretty much everybody has him, I think. Then you've got Luke Jackson and Nick Madden, who almost nobody has either of them, and both over six. I think Martin's maybe $5.99, but yeah, both very expensive, so hard to bring in. Jack McRae is an interesting one, how we think he'll go for the rest of the year. Then I think you can nearly throw a blanket over guys like Petrarca, Matt Kennedy, Isaac Rankin. You got Horne-Francis and Sam Darcy in that mix as well. So, I mean, yeah, we're just off the top of your head, is there anyone there that you think, the guys that you would target that, I would really love to have them just sitting there for the final 10 games?
Yeah, I think most of those guys you mentioned, they're pretty good. They're pretty neat. Bont would be the one I'd be targeting if I didn't have him. I hadn't jumped on him already once he gets a little bit cheaper, if you can hold off. I think he's the best player in the game for a reason. Hot take.
Well, he's been a bit off the last couple of weeks.
He has. I'm trying to manifest it now that I've got him.
Form is temporary, class is permanent.
There you go.
That's the Bont and Patch way. So I actually came with notes prepared.
With notes, wow.
On this. I didn't know that necessarily this would be a discussion point. But so I love Bailey Dale for the run home. So the Bulldogs run is fantastic. I mean, he's played well probably 4 of the last 5 games. He had that massive ceiling game with 49 touches. Then he got tagged the next week. But if he can escape too much attention, I think there's some huge scores potentially for Bailey going forward. Probably someone who's not been talked about a lot is Josh Daicos. He's quietly having quite possibly an All-Australian season. Great ball user, as we know. I think his game translates to Supercoach really well. I think Collingwood's run to come is quite good. And I don't know about you guys. So you get mid to forward, mid and defender status. Bit of flexibility. I have lost all confidence in midfielders. So the tag is just ever present. Scores are going up and down. Bont and Patch is a perfect example of this. But it seems like the guys off half back are just getting pill no matter what. So I got like having Sinclair and Wanganeen Miller, it just feels like guaranteed tons in your team every week. And then Dale, unless he's going to get a really hard tag, he's going to score well for you. And I think Josh Daicos is one of the most consistent players in the game. So I'm just throwing his name out there as someone who I think is going to go well for you down the stretch. And honestly, I don't have a mid for you because I don't trust any of them. But, I mean, Ed Richards is almost the number 1 ranked player in the game according to Champion data. But you have to pay a premium to get him. Jai Caldwell looks like he's quite well priced for Essendon, but you've got the buy coming up. So that's the big drawback there. And then the other name I wanted to throw out is Harry Sheezel. So looks relatively well priced for a guy who's now seemingly playing midfield minutes. But are you willing to ride the Clarko roller coaster where he seemingly changes Sheezel's role every 2 weeks?
Well, Drew, you gave the interview that I think got a lot of attention in fantasy and Supercoach circles last week, where you spoke to Colwyn McKercher and asked him the questions that we all wanted to ask him about what is going on.
Harry Sheezel.
Yeah, threw Harry in there as well. So, I mean, you've got the mail more than any of us. What do you think these roles hold for? I mean, it's quite a few weeks to go, and Clarko has been known to throw his players around, but it seems to be working for them at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's always robbing Peter to pay Paul. When you're changing these roles through midfield. So I think they came into the season really hoping that Tom Powell was going to take a leap. So you put Powell, but in order for him to do that, you've got to play him through the midfield, and then you've got to take someone out. So Sheezel, we know what he can do at halfback. I don't think that's his future at North Melbourne. I think it's going to be as a centre forward, impactful player with ball in hand.
The player he's drafted as.
Yes, and exactly right. And then you find someone who can play the halfback role, which I think probably should be McKercher. They've tried him ahead of the ball and on the wing, didn't work. So in a perfect world, I would say, Sheezel plays midfield, and someone like Luke Parker probably gets just phased out a little bit of his centre bounce role. Then hopefully they can keep Powell in there. Wardlaw, they can do their thing with the young guys. So my read on it is, in the last 3 weeks, Clarko has shifted McKercher into a more natural role, and he said, all right, stuff this half-forward stuff with the Shees. Let's just chuck him in the gut. So maybe he's just coming around to playing these guys in the positions where they can be effectual right now.
Would you be trading Harry Sheezel in if you didn't have him? $512,000. He's pretty cheap as they come.
I mean, I love that price. I've had him all year. I'm a Sheezel guy. I've got him in every single fantasy team you could possibly think of.
The anti-Kane Corns.
Sure, yeah, very much so. But I think I was proven wrong at the start of the year. Paying a high price for Sheezel when he wasn't in that role was the wrong decision. But right now, I think he's a great target.
Yeah, I'd bring him in. And to your point, like you could easily stick him in your midfield, stick him in defence, wherever you've got a slot. Like, if you can have 7 or 8 of these mid-def guys and a couple of them sitting in your midfield, I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, shout out Tim Mitchell, who's got about 12 of them.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, you're paying over 600 for Richards, right? And you can get Shees for 512.
Yeah,
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'll be doing that too. Stephen asking, what's a good amount of trades to have left after completing your team? He's going to have 6 left, and I'd be pretty happy with that. I'm going down to 4, which I'm not wrapped about, but
you and me both, Al. It's I mean, the perfect amount is 20, but that's not going to happen in any world. So,
how are you sitting with trades?
If I pull the trigger on all 3 this week, which I should, I'll have 5 left.
And is that team done?
No, I'm not quite there. My utility is currently Nick Madden, so I've still got a little bit of jimmying to do.
Yeah, I think if your team's done with 6, you're doing very, very well. I think you'd be stoked with that. I think 4 or 5, I feel kind of okay. I think if you're less than 4, then I'd be feeling a bit stressed.
Yeah, I think 6 sounds like a good number. Got a few questions about Mills here, which we sort of talked about, and someone asking basically, would you get McCarthy? Can McCarthy average more than Mills for the run home? And I guess sort of the broader question there is, does he change the calculus a little bit in terms of, we're looking at getting, say, 23 premiums, including that flex spot, but can one of those now basically be McCarthy? And that hopefully, saves a bit of cash to fix some other issues.
I don't know. It's very hard calling it early on just one point of data and one game where, obviously Carlton didn't really care what he was doing or what anyone was doing from West Coast because they had a big lead on the board and then shut up shop. So I find it really hard to judge that and say that he's going to be fieldable all year, but flex does give us the chance that he, can drop off if he's not performing as well. He'd be the perfect guy to loop with a McKercher or a Mills or someone down back. I'm not as crash hot on Tom McCarthy staying the GOAT that everyone thinks he's going to be for the rest of the season, but very happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think realistically, 85 average or something like that would be pretty good. And if that's my last spot on the field, hopefully that's the one that drops off, with 22 proper primos. That's a pretty good spot. But we know every week something happens, someone gets injured or, Bont gets tagged and has 60. And so you don't sort of really want to be relying on that happening. But given the cash available, that's probably the best I can get.
I think he said after the game, even when he was playing at Hyatt, he wasn't getting 30 in the game. So, I mean, it'd be unrealistic to expect him to go 130 every week. But I think it releases the pressure on us a little bit to be trying to have that extra premium.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really good point to say, how much differential will there be between Mills average and McCarthy? And that is the price differential is massive, but I don't think there's going to be a huge gap in scoring.
No,
so that might be your answer.
Yeah, and I mean, if he gets 10 kick-ins every week, that's a pretty good start.
And honestly, if you hold him for 4 weeks and then you're able to, generate cash with some guys you bring in this week, if you've got enough trades, you can then, you can certainly be a stopgap for a couple of weeks and then you trade in someone cheap in a couple of weeks. So I think there's still certainly scope you'd certainly bring him in. No one's going to miss him, but.
Yeah, it's just a question of whether do you sort of have him on your bench, maybe try and loop him on potentially, or can you rely on him as a sitting in flex or sitting as
well, I think it kind of feeds into the question of what's a completed team, which we've got somewhere in as well, which we may as well just crack into now. Drew, what the hell does a completed team look like this year?
It's not complete until all trades are gone. From my perspective, he's continue to keep rolling through trying to find the best guys because, Bont. So Nick Daicos this week, the perfect example. If this was the last round of the season, St Kilda were playing Collingwood and you had Daicos and you had 1 trade left, you'd be trading him out.
Yep.
Like the win-taker tag is that scary. So from that perspective, your team's never complete. But given that you've got the extra spot that drops off, that does mitigate against the tag a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I've got McKercher on field, probably Mills after this week. They're sort of, I'm counting them as primos to get actual full-blooded primos in every spot is, if you've done that, you've done extremely well.
Yep.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think that's still the aim for a lot of people, but I don't know if it should be the aim or you should aim to, have one of those spots be McCarthy if that's your flex or whatever.
Yeah, I suppose, would you be happy with that and keep a couple of trades in the bank, maybe have 4 or 5, or go down to, 2 or 3 but actually have, McCarthy as you back up on the bench kind of thing and you've got real primos everywhere?
I'd rather have the extra trades considering how long there is left in the season. But I think by season's end, you'd probably want someone with a really high ceiling in that spot instead of McCarthy. And I think, that ceiling, especially like my week this week was pretty average because I had 2 guys score more than 120, which, during best 18, I still had enough guys playing, but it was just, there was no one with a big ceiling, which was really annoying. And I think that'll really show up in the later rounds of the year, where if you have someone like a Shea Bolton who can go either, 60 or 150, I think then that'll shine through a bit more if you can get those guys on field rather than a Tom McCarthy if he's averaging very solid 80s or 90s. I think that might be a point of difference later in the year, but also we haven't seen what flex looks like long term yet. So I don't know. There's still a lot of water to go under the bridge.
It's interesting you mentioned Shea. So there's a bunch of questions about the forward line, mainly around Sam Darcy and Jason Horne-Francis. Someone asking, do you choose one? If you can only get one of them? Do you go this week? We sort of touched on that earlier, or wait? And there is a question, would you trade Shea to get one of those guys? Or would you trade someone like Isaac Rankin to get one of those guys? I mean, a lot
of people are trading Rankin out this week.
Yeah. Are they worth it? I mean, they're sort of those high ceiling type players, but is it worth a trade?
It depends on how many trades you've got left, what the rest of your team looks like. There's so many different variables in it. I think generally I'd probably avoid trading out a Shea or an Isaac or one of these guys that are in that quasi-premo status. I think I'd probably lean towards holding them unless you've got trades coming out the wazoo. But yeah, I think Darcy could, as you mentioned, the Dogs' run home is incredible, and Sam Darcy's incredible. I think I'd be trying to get him in possibly ahead of Horne-Francis because of the spike scores, and I reckon you might get more out of him than Horne-Francis, who does occasionally go big, but is often in that. I know, so Horne-Francis might average more on the run home, but you might get more points on your field out of Sam Darcy.
It's an interesting way to look at it, isn't it? I mean, Horne-Francis played a lot forward.
Yeah, he actually hardly had any CBAs.
And he played incredibly well, and he looked very dangerous to come back beautifully off the hamstring. But if Port get flogged and he's playing forward and has a quiet game, like that ends up being a shocker. Whereas like Sam Darcy, even though he is also a forward, the ball is being funneled through him almost every single entry. The only thing to note this week, I have strong interest in trading in Darcy this week. Ben Miller will probably play on him, is having a fantastic season for Richmond. So if you're going into it expecting 180 from Sam Darcy this week, I just want to temper everyone's expectations slightly because because Miller's having a great year.
Yeah, and Miller is one of the guys that is tall enough to actually get the fist on the ball when Darcy's at full stretch.
David King, 3.5 metre extended, whatever the maths works out as. But I mean, looking at that draw for the Dogs, I went through it quickly before. So Richmond at Marvel this week. Obviously, they've already had the bye, so you don't have to worry about that. Then coming up after that, they've got North Melbourne also at Marvel, Adelaide at Marvel, Essendon at Marvel, Melbourne, that's at the G, West Coast at Marvel, and they finish with Freo at Marvel.
That's a lot of sides without particularly strong defences at Essendon, at North Melbourne, at West Coast.
I love the Sandy Brock story.
Sandy Brock's incredible.
But he's going to have a real rough day against Sam Darcy.
Yeah, it could rival the day he had against Jesse Hogan on debut, really.
I'm flat for Sandy.
Oh, I love Sandy.
He waited a long time for that debut and he got stitched up having to play on the Coleman medalist, didn't he?
Yeah, got isolated, left on his own.
He scored right in Supercoach that game.
He scored very well somehow. But, I think Darcy. Also, I'm not convinced Horne-Francis plays this weekend. I don't know if you saw the footage of him at training this week. Was not moving his shoulder at all. Just looked very ginger, very sore, and don't know how many painkiller jabs you can get to actually make it move. But I wouldn't be surprised.
Darcy's a little bit cheap. I mean, they both got high break evens. Darcy is a little bit cheaper. I think if you can get one this week, I would be getting Darcy, and then if that means he's the only one you get, that's what I'd do because you can get him first, and Horne-Francis maybe in a week or two where his price still should be okay, maybe a bit better than it is now, and hopefully he's fully fit.
I suspect me saying Darcy is also just me trying to cope with the fact that I can't afford Horne-Francis, and I'm just trying to make myself feel better about it. So there is that.
I think he admitted when he went for scans on Monday that he was feeling all right, but that was possibly because of the painkillers. But also, you're never gonna test a shoulder stinger early in the week. They're gonna wait as long as possible.
And how much do you read into when they interview, doorstop a player, which you've probably done it yourself outside a club and asked, how you're feeling, they're going in for scans. I mean, don't they always say, like Charlie Curnow, I think I'll be fine. Do we believe any of that? Do the players really understand their own injuries or their?
Yes, they do. Yeah, players. I would say 90% of players are meticulous in terms of understanding their injuries, understanding their bodies. Like I've had some really interesting conversations with players over the years. The detail that they can go into about the way their body works is really fascinating. I would believe a player doorstopped at scans ahead of a coach speaking at a press conference. So I would put more stock in it.
Okay, good to know. Last name that has been mentioned in terms of the forward discussion is Jack McRae, whose price also is coming down a little bit after some little time off from injury and a couple of lower sort of 80s type scores. Is he someone you'd be thinking about potentially trying to target if you had a spot there?
Well, I mean, you were talking about the fact that the Saints are going to have to change plans. Does that mean McRae finds himself on the outer a little bit if they go for youth? That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I don't have a read on that, but he was brought to the club for a reason, to be like a workhorse 85% CBA guy. I would find it hard to believe that they would roll that back at round 15. Ross has a huge amount of trust in senior players, and if you asked him about a midfield structure of an AFL side that's pushing for finals or trying to win games of footy, he'll tell you the best people to have in there are solid professionals, 28 to 30-year-olds, understanding the structures. So Boxall might play this week, but he'll play 55% game time. It'll be limited. If Garcia comes in, it'll be 30% CBAs with a bit of half forward. Just roll in for a little bit, you'll get a taste. But there's still going to be Steele and McRae, in my view, will have heavy minutes because they've got to shoulder the load. You can't just, when West Coast brought in Tom Gross to play midfield against Carlton and gather round, like you saw what happened. It was a butchering. Yeah, like that's the risk of putting young guys in too early. So my view would be McRae keeps the minutes.
Yep.
A few other questions we're going to roll through to finish us off, and one big one that's actually, Patch, you dropped a bit of a grenade when you walked out the door to get on the plane a few weeks ago, which is the idea of potentially trading out Max Gawn. And seeing this week a few people are picking up on this. So there's a question, would you get Grundy or TDK to replace Gawn? But I guess the theory is money has to come from somewhere. The bench isn't really doing it for us. Could trading Gawn out, get you that 150K and hopefully not cost you too many points? Is that a viable move?
I think it's could be a viable move. It could be the worst trade you make all year, and that's the risk. I still stand by it. I think last week would have been the perfect week to do it. Gawn coming up against, once we figured out that there were two rucks playing for Port, I think that could have been the go-to before he dropped a bit of cash, which he did this week. And Tom DeConing just looks fantastic. But the injuries at Carlton then now have me a bit worried about if they bring in Pitanet. Does that then mean DeConing goes forward? Do they have to tandem? What's the deal there? I'm not sure. I still like the idea of trading Max Gawn out because, as you said, the cash needs to come from somewhere. And as we've seen, with Bont, like you just can't keep it up all year. Like players averaging 130 for an entire season happens so rarely. It's, Gary Ablett aside, you get players will do it. You might get one player doing it a season, if that. Yeah. And looking at his run home, he's got a tougher run home, so I'm just not entirely sure. Wits this week, he's got Riley O'Brien, Tristan Cherry, Tom DeConing, Rowan Marshall, and then has an easier run for the last 4 weeks. I can see him dropping a lot of cash and not scoring as many points in that run. I still think it's viable. I just not entirely sure who to after the Carlton injuries, because DeConing was the one I thought was the standout, but do you have to look at like a Tim English or someone a bit cheaper in order to then make it work is the thing that's now, Darcy Cameron perhaps. Because I think if you're trading him to Brodie Grundy's over 600K, you're making 80K.
Grundy's, Darcy pointed out on the layer, is absolutely flying.
He's flying. I love Brodie Grundy.
You're not really getting that much money from it. So
but
really,
it defeats the purpose of the Bruin manoeuvre trade. So I think if you're doing it, it needs to be someone in the 550K or under range. But yeah, I don't know exactly who that is. Drew, because you're considering it this week, aren't you?
I just think this is such an interesting, like, SuperCoach IQ topic.
Yeah.
Like, what are you willing to sacrifice to try and make a bit of cash and take a risk? Like, put your cojones on the line. Like, Gawn's not going to score that well over the next 4 weeks, and he has the bye. You just read out the run. It's tough. But then, so Grundy is potentially going to average, 120, 130 over the next 4 or 5 weeks. He's got a good run. He's in great form. So you're getting extra points, but you lose the trade. And you're also trading out a probable 8-time All-Australian. And I think there's a bit of F you and Max Gawn right now. Like, off the back of the Stephen May stuff, Melbourne not going that well, Simon Goodwin under a little bit of pressure. He wants that 8th All-Australian. He wants to go into the Hall of Fame and maybe be a legend, wants to be the greatest ruckman of all time. So after the bye last year, there was definitely a drop-off with him, but there was injury, there was some mitigating circumstances. So write off Max Gawn at your peril. But I also love the idea of we've got to find cash somewhere. If you've got enough trades, go down to a Marshall or an English and, put that cash on someone else's head and you could be getting ahead of the competition.
Yeah.
Everyone Marshalls. It's a tough watch sometimes, but potentially, his last year after the bye, he was just about the top ruckman in Supercoach.
It's not the first time that he's done it. He can storm home.
It's it's that thing where it is such a big risk and it could blow up. But, if you trade in Darcy Cameron and Cameron averages 110 on the run home and Gawn average, he dips 10 points and averages 120 on the run home, that 10 points difference between the two of them on field, can you make that up somewhere else by going Elijah Hewitt up to
Jason Horne-Francis,
Nick Daicos, some Zach Merritt next week, like someone else? Like, do you then make up 25 points, 30 points somewhere else? If so, is that worth pulling the trigger? You then got to factor in Gawn as a captaincy option in that last run home. And if he scores 170, then what does that do to the maths? It's just, there's a lot going on. I wouldn't advise doing it unless you feel very sure of yourself and very confident. Maybe not confident, but you can understand what it might do to your team. But I certainly think it's really viable this week for teams that are really struggling for cash and maybe have been more prudent with trades than I have.
And if you're a bit low on numbers this week, potentially it's an extra green dot.
Yeah, as well. I'd rather trade out Max Gawn than an Isaac Rankin this week.
Oh, there you go. Speaking of rucks, you mentioned, I think you already have Nick Madden. He's on the bubble this week. He's got a break even of about -90, but how long do we think he stays in the GWS team in that? Cheap guys who play ruck can be some of the best picks in Supercoach in fantasy, but you've got to stay in the team, I guess.
This is something that I will be investigating quite strongly over the bye period, because I just had this feeling when Briggs went out of the side and Madden was going to get his 3-week crack. Is there a way that he shows enough in this 3 weeks to stay ahead of Briggs for an extended run? Because let's be honest, Kieran Briggs has not had a good season.
No.
Mitigating circumstances, you get a concussion in opening round. That's tough. And he's probably been carrying this ankle for a while because he just hasn't looked like himself. But I don't think Kieran Briggs has that many runs on the board to own the #1 ruck slot at GWS.
We've seen the Giants change rucks mid-season before.
Flynn to Briggs.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm pretty sure Flynn took over from
Sam Jacobs?
Sam Jacobs or Mumford mid-season. I can't remember who it was, but I'm sure Flynn.
Dawson Simpson?
John Giles? All the hits. They're very good at giving rookie rucks a run and just giving them, just throwing them in and saying, no, you've had 3 games, you've proven yourself. The other guy can't get in. Maybe it was Braden Pruce. It might have been Pruce.
Oh, yeah, Pruce. One of the greats.
Nick Madden, handsome man too.
Great.
Yeah.
Gosh, he's good.
He's the man bun could just stay in fashion just because of Nick Madden.
Oh, well, not because of...
and you, Patch.
Oh, okay.
You're still holding the torch really strongly for it.
Well, lovely. But yeah, I don't know. It's we'll have to wait and see on Madden as to if he sticks around.
If he does, that could be an amazing pickup.
Absolutely. Where do you play him though? Do you then stick him in your flex?
Yeah, is he sitting flex?
Max Gawn to Nick Madden? Don't do that.
No.
Do not do that. I'm not endorsing that. But
Well, he is currently in my flex. I traded him in when he came into the side. And I'm just holding fire for as long as possible, but it feel like I may have to do a bit of work if Briggs comes back in to like find a way to get someone into that slot. Because obviously everyone's got Boyd, right? Yeah. There's R3, so someone's going to have to go.
Yeah, tricky. But at least you'll get a price bump out of him this week.
Cash.
And then see what happens.
But for those trading him in, I think you then got to be really conscious of the fact that you then need to use another trade to trade him out if you bring him in for cash. And I don't have the trades for that, but if you do, sure, but just be aware that I think at this stage, the guys we're trading in aren't getting traded back out of your team.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I've seen people asking that about Mills too, is, they're using him as a stepping stone kind of thing, and I think not at this stage of the year.
No, not.
If you're picking him now, same with McCurcher.
If you're playing for leagues,
he's going to be there for the whole year.
Yeah, if you're playing for league and you've got 10 trades sitting there, sure. But I think for a lot of us, no.
Yeah, everyone's a keeper now. Last question, last upgrade. Would you pick Daicos, Butters, or Bont? This is from the 95 guy who's ranked 95th overall.
Well, which Daicos is the question now?
You couldn't trade into Nick this week, surely.
No.
But he's a top 3 AFL player, so it's.
You think at some stage he's going to go on that run and score 150s.
You know what? They're 3 absolute guns.
Yeah.
You probably couldn't go wrong. I think if I was picking, I'd go Bont, despite the letdown of last week.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's your final upgrade. You may as well spend the cash.
Yeah, it probably doesn't matter if you.
So you're not as stressed about, keeping some left over. I think, considering the Dogs run, I'd go Bont narrowly ahead of Butters. But for people that are, I think Daicos at 520K. No, he's not 520K.
Yeah, 530, I think maybe.
530. Very cheap for what he can offer.
And Butters even, we all jumped on last week and I think he went up about $5,000. So he's still pretty affordable too.
And looking at their run, aside from St Kilda this week, there's not a lot of tags looming unless there are some rogue Josh Dunkley tags or stuff like that. I think he's got a great run and he's a incredible pickup this week at that value.
What do you think about the possibility of looping Daicos if there's a tag threat hanging over his head?
I mean, if you can loop, then
with like a Zach Johnson or somebody.
Yeah, start him with the vest.
I think Phantom actually did that one game earlier this year. And
was it deliberate or was that another Max Gawn captaincy situation?
Yeah, I don't think that's the worst idea.
One more bit of news for you boys before we go. Saved it till last. If you're looking for a forward or back downgrade this week, I think the Flying Viking's going to play for St Kilda. Alexander Taru.
Yeah.
Can you spell his first name?
Alixzander.
That's very impressive. Very well done.
Just sound the Nuffle Dossie.
The Flying Viking. Have you guys seen the highlights from the VFL last week?
Seen a couple of snippets, but
8 intercept marks, and the way that he hangs in the air is freakish, like genuine, like MJ hang time. Like I reckon he'd be able to dunk a serious basketball, but fortunately he's not. He's playing footy, and I reckon he's playing for the Saints this week. So
basketball background.
Well, given he is a Viking, I'm going to say he's got some sort of fighting background with the helmet on. But I feel like he doesn't spread and get a lot of chip around the backline possessions, but intercept possessions in Supercoach.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe he might just be a handy one on the bench.
Yeah, that defence forward eligibility is very handy, 160K. And as we said, if you bring someone in, it's as a keeper, so it doesn't really matter. Like if it's just for cover, it's a good shout.
All right, we'll wrap things up with a quick look at captains for the week. No Max Gawn, obviously, on the bye. And we've got Tristan Cherry up against TDK. So whether that influences whether you would trust either of those guys. Anyone else, Patch, that you've looked at this stage of the week?
Andy Brayshaw is playing Essendon in Perth on Thursday night. That's as vice-captain-y as I've ever seen. He was 450. And then Bailey Dale is playing Richmond on Sunday.
Yeah.
And
what have you got Luke Jackson against Vigo?
Oh, if I had Luke Jackson, he would just straight C. I wouldn't bother vice-captaining him. But sadly, I do not have him.
So then, for me, Freo guys stand out. Daicos against St Kilda, but that Marcus Windhager tag looms pretty large. I'd probably avoid the captaincy there. I think halfbacks always score well against Gold Coast, so Whitfield or Ash if you've got those guys. But then it comes to the last game of the round, Bulldogs Richmond. So no VCing, it's just straight captaincy. Are we confident enough in the Bont this week, or what about, Sam Darcy, or is it Ben Miller scare you off?
I wouldn't be straight seeing Bont. He's just, at least for this week, he's lost my trust.
Yeah.
I like a VC for Bailey Smith. I mean,
the
bloke just keeps racking the footy up. Give him every chance.
Max Holmes could put in that same bracket.
Max Holmes is in unbelievable form. If
Yeah.
he didn't have the bye, I would be trying to get him in ASAP.
Yeah.
I like the C on either Whitfield or Dale Sunday.
Yep.
Probably.
Yeah, I think Bailey Dale's going to be. Yeah, we mentioned that Bulldogs run.
Yep.
He's going to be a bad miss for me, I think, this year. Yeah, and he was available at a pretty good price a few weeks ago too. Damn it.
Well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. I missed Max Holmes at a good price, and it just happens.
It hurts.
Paid up for Bont and Max instead. Oh well.
Yep.
On we go.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another great episode. Max, thank you for coming back from Spain to be with us this week.
No, wouldn't be anywhere else. Certainly not on a beach drinking sangria.
Exactly. And Drew, thank you for coming in. Do you want to give us, how's the GOAT Fantasy going? Tell people where they can find it.
Yeah, so Instagram and Twitter and X at GOAT Fantasy News. But yeah, we're here to be your fantasy companion. So everything I do is based off news. So that's what you'll get, short little snippets, whether it's Twitter or there's a podcast as well, where I'll just share my thoughts on things that are going on. So I'm not going to be making mass recommendations because I don't consider myself necessarily a fantasy expert, but I am following all the news like 24/7. So you won't miss anything if you're following along with Go Fantasy.
Yeah, that's great. And that's what we need. And it was a bit of a space that needed to be filled, I think. So yeah, it's a great initiative to, find out who's pushing up from the twos, what's happening with, what's really going on with injuries and all that sort of stuff. So good luck with
thanks
that.
For having me on, boys.
Is there a GOAT that GOAT Fantasy is named after? Is there one GOAT, or it's?
Well, my fantasy, any sort of fantasy sports, whether it's NBA or NFL or AFL, whatever it's called, the Mountain Goats.
Yep.
Which is just a name I just came up with in high school. So it's just based off the franchise.
Yep, we love that.
Happy with that. All right.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being with us. Thanks, everybody. Happy trading this week. Good luck in the second last buy round, and we'll catch you again soon.